Bleak Barrens, Frigid Fortress, and Destiny's Dawn are some of the hardest maps in the entire game, but what if them being hard is problematic for the balancing and are directly related to some changes? In this video we will go over how these maps have exposed some problematic towers and caused some infamous nerfs. Here's how the hard maps have exposed tower heroes balancing. Shouldn't we call them Impwick maps though?
I don't know.
I do not like that term. Before we had all these maps, if you wanted a challenge, you had maps like Alien Attack, Plastic Barrage, and Silent Sanctuary. All of these maps filled a specific niche that made the map hard in the first place. But we always wanted a harder map, more specifically, a map that's hard at every part of the game. This would eventually lead up into the release of Bleak Barrens, a level 50 map. Now, the map being level 50 was a decent surprise. We've constantly gone on about how they'll never release a map past level 40, and how Chaos Kingdom is supposed to be the final map. I'd still consider Chaos Kingdom to be the final map in the game, despite how most people believe it to be the easiest map in the game. Bleak was different from other maps. It introduced a lot of mechanics, including dark matters that copy other enemies, enemies that stun, enemies that downgrade, and the infamous void type that was only applied to the boss, but still. For the map itself, it started with both Ghost and Spider instead of Slime and Goblin, very early Skeletons and Reapers instead of the Wave 10 Goblin, a massive Sandworm DPS test. It really threw everything the game had at you. Like most updates, it had a lot of issues that had to be fixed in subsequent updates, but unlike most updates, these were directly related to the map itself. For instance, Void Skull Ghosts originally didn't appear. They were in the game but just didn't appear for some reason. These enemies, unlike Fire Skull Ghosts, appear once per wave and are slow, tanky, and downgrade heroes when they die. Once they fixed them spawning, it immediately made Bleak Barrens impossible. Whoops, and they fixed it by just removing the ability outright. And I personally think they're just fine as is, but just a bit boring, you know, without the ability. Now, the Bleak I'm talking about is very different to the Bleak Barrens we have now. In the follower update a month later, a lot changed about the game. Wave generation got changed, so now a random mid-game enemy appears on Wave 10. This change was reasonably controversial, as it required you to bring Dumpster Child and killed normal towers being used for early game. Bleak also got a few changes of its own, mainly the addition of other Reaper variants and Dark Skeletons. Now, there's nothing wrong with adding more variety to a map, but the wave generation change in specific made it so Sia spawned on Wave 10. This intentionally made it impossible to beat it for the average player. Now, it was still technically possible to beat Bleak Barrens, but it required a very specific strategy. Now, you had all 8 people donate to a single person until they get a max odd pull. Not very fair, isn't it? A long time ago, Discount Dog used to affect summoners, which was a niche strat but it never caught on. This strategy was used a lot for Bleak Barrens before they made it so Discount Dog ability never affects summoners. This change didn't affect much when it got patched, but still, this is one of the few balance changes made because of these maps. This era of Bleak would be short-lived, as they would quickly nerf the early spawn system to occur much later. Dark Skeletons and Reaper variants would stay though. Bleak is now a fairly balanced map and most things can work. The only thing you're forced to do is mana share and get 4 Maitakes, which isn't the best thing in the world. Eidolon is a fairly interesting map, isn't it? Small map, one of the brightest and one of the very few to have mini-bosses. You'll know how much I love them. The boss mechanic is fairly unique too, and doesn't make her an RNG nightmare. This isn't about her though, sorry you crazy lady. In the same update, Lemonade Cat got nerfed while overall mana got buffed. This is a fair change, going farmless is just as viable as running farm now. This was because they thought farming normally was incredibly boring, and going farmless was actually fun because you contributed to the game more. We can all guess what might have caused that mindset to pop up. The same update also nerfed penalties from support heroes to almost nothing, and nerfed Maitake's poison duration. This couldn't possibly have some foreshadowing. Hitting him early. I've heard that the devs don't really think this is a good mechanic, and I'm all for a change, but I don't really mind the price increase too much. After almost a year later without balance changes or hard maps, we received 2 new event maps. Pumpkin Paranoia was released and the gameplay was very similar to Bleak Barrens. One of the 2 strats for Pumpkin was mana sharing for Bunny spam. Bunny is a pretty meh tower, but his biggest strength is his ridiculously high cost efficiency. This is the reason why he got shadow nerfed by increasing his level 3 cost by 600 mana. Frigid is a similar map, but I'll choose to ignore it, because it's pretty much the same as Pumpkin and hasn't directly caused any changes. Frigid had a unique boss and I'll give it that. These maps opened the mana share strategy to even more people, and people are using it to beat normal maps and it's working. Now, I don't really want to complain about the difficulty of these maps as much. The average strategy to beat both is to quickly get 4 Maitakes and upgrade one of those Maitakes to level 4 using mana share. Then you get max discount dog and you use that max discount dog to get a ton of hot dog franks. After you get those franks, you would get Spectre and Byte all within the first 15 or so waves. Pre-nerf Byte could literally hold entire groups of enemies, mainly the gnomes, gatling gifts and snowdrops at once. Spectre also had 0 penalty for upgrading him early. I've heard that the devs don't really think this is a good mechanic, and I'm all for a change, but I don't really mind the price increase too much. A common complaint these maps have is that they end up being easy after a certain wave, and I think these 2 heroes in particular, along with Frank being broken in general, are why people think this. And for being one of the hardest maps in the game, you're faced with a 200 HP, fast boss. Now, I think this boss is fairly alright. Just a bit boring. This guy literally gets deleted from a 20-second stun because El Crutch Blino's only weakness is him being completely useless against Void-type enemies. Now he's completely doable without Goblino, but it still sort of shows. Now we are on to the March update of 2024. Before this, however, the devs were talking about some balance changes and how the new map won't have mana share. I think me and a few other people thought the balance changes would be for Destiny, but the only tower that got nerfed was Byte, and the changes in specific would be for the Make a Cake update. This eventually led to Destiny's Dawn having mana share completely disabled. However, Destiny still gave you a ton of mana because everything is so strong. But Ornette required this, because she constantly downgrades your stuff, and is also a Void type, so she completely resists Crucifix. This map basically does what Bleak does, but to a new level. Conjurers are Void type and they can actually stun, unlike Seers. A lot of stuff is strong and they appear even earlier than Bleak. Barrel Boys return, the most annoying enemy in the game! Due to the scaling on this map and how there's no mana share, level 1 Quinn spam was required for early game. She's basically the golden scout of this game, really good for early game, especially Destiny's Dawn. This eventually led to a nerf in Make a Cake. This is probably the only nerf that would have happened regardless though. The main reason my mana share was disabled was because you could easily get a max Maitake before wave 10 and do early game easily. This strategy was only useful for Pumpkin and Frigid because it was usually better to just farm and get early game tower upgrades as you can afford them. And it doesn't help how we weren't used to that strategy and how both of those maps were only possible because of that. I always saw maxing Maitake before wave 10 as just good teamwork, and now that I think about it, might have been responsible for them absolutely killing her damage in Idle Encore. For Burrow Brawl, I guess it's the same issue as the other maps, but it was made after all those things got nerfed, and I kinda like the map anyway. Instead of the strong enemy appearing on wave 14, it's now wave 20, so I guess. You've gone this far, feel free to like and subscribe. I've been wanting to do more of these videos along with map strategies. Unlike my previous ones, I'll actually go in depth. As for the heroic skin video, I kinda completely scrapped it, though people are making custom render videos right after I scrapped it. See you, I guess. See ya.